Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your host, Jake of College Football Red Zone, welcoming you back to another edition of the 2025 preseason deep dive series, where this time around we will be diving into the theatrics of the Conference USA, the historical starting point for many of the FBS programs around the country. But as for the conference itself, while it may be considered one of the lesser conferences in college football, at the same time, it can also be considered one of the more entertaining conferences in college football as well, especially with the parity that I think we are more than capable of seeing this upcoming season, where you do see really some emerging programs in here, some teams that could become surprise contenders here in 2025. Of course, that those fair share of high scoring offenses, which makes games within the Conference USA very exciting to watch. And this conference, in addition, did add a couple of programs, as we do welcome both Delaware and Missouri State from the FBS ranks, even though they may not be eligible for any FBS postseason action this season. Their addition does add some fresh energy and some long-term potential to the league as well, should they stay within the Conference USA as well. We jump into a conference as well where in this non-conference slate, there's going to at least have some opportunities as a whole, as an entire entity, to get some national exposures and really help shape the national perception of this conference going into the rest of the 2025 season, as they're going to be facing opponents from many of the power conferences, as well as the Sun Belt, which the Sun Belt has its fair arguments in terms of being considered the best G5 league in all of college football, down in that group of 5, group of 6 level. So because of those several top 25 caliber opponents, they have a chance to at least, make some early noise and prepare themselves for the second half of the year, where many of these teams will be trying to make some late runs and get that bowl eligibility that way. Now, there is some consensus. There is mostly consensus in this conference that Liberty is going to come in here as your preseason favorite, and I am going to be the holder of that preseason favorite title as well for Liberty for right now, after they are trying to really avenge a disappointing 2024 campaign that does have some talent compared to the rest of the conference, but there is some retooling that happened on that front as well. But then you take a look at some of the other programs, right? So even maybe second with Western Kentucky, I'd feel pretty good about Western Kentucky being possibly my second best team when it's all said and done. Really, 3 for 12 is really where things get extremely interesting, where you have an extreme cluster of teams where most of the teams in this conference are capable of going to a bowl game, but at the same time, I think only a small handful from this conference does end up going into a bowl game. But, definitely some interesting storylines. Taking a look at Kennesaw State, FIU, and Sam Houston, for example, they're going to be all looking to try to take step forwards, as they all have new coaching staffs. So with all the coaching changes that happen at multiple programs, some incoming talent that did come in through the transfer portal, coming primarily from the Power Four, making its way downward in search of playing time, and schedule that could produce some weekly drama, mainly in those midweek games, on Tuesday and Wednesday, where there will generally be more eyeballs on this conference as we get into the middle point of the season. It could shape up to be one of the more unpredictable and entertaining in the group of 5 landscape. So that's really what we have looking forward to for the Conference USA, a conference that is not necessarily going to be your best G5 conference, but certainly one of the more chaotic and probably one of the more entertaining conferences to look after, really, as you get into that 3rd through 12th. I think is really, you could kind of do a randomizer, and I would generally agree with you. It's kind of the G5 version of the Big 12, really, that kind of vibe to it. So hopefully you guys are excited for the deep dive of the Conference USA. And before I jump into my team by team breakdown of what I have going on in terms of who do I have ranked among the Conference USA, go ahead and do a couple of favors for me. Hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do have to be brand new. Doing both of those things not only warms up my cold dead heart on the inside, but it gets this video out to more passionate college football fans like yourself. And then you also have a real opportunity to be an OG of this channel, really be an A1 since day one. I think as I'm recording this, I only have about a dozen subscribers, so you could definitely join the bandwagon. So we have some very exciting things coming up this fall that has not been attempted before in a long time. So if you want to join in that experience, definitely encourage you hitting that subscribe button down the lower right hand corner as well. But we'll go ahead and jump into it now. We're going to start with our 12th best team, or otherwise the worst team, but I think in the Conference USA. And it does start with the Kennesaw State Owls. Now, I thought firing their previous head coach was an unwise decision, in my opinion. Firing somebody who essentially started your program from the ground up and then even aided in the transition up to the FBS level. I understand that last year is not ideal by any means, but when you're making the transition from the FCS up to the FBS, you can't necessarily have the highest expectations in the world. Most FCS programs would struggle to make that jump, and that was evident for Kennesaw State in year number one. That being said, though, the new head coaching hire for Kennesaw State in Jerry Mack should prove to be a solid hire, right? He's proven that he has and can win at the FCS level. He's done it at multiple stops, but now it becomes a question of, can he win at the FBS level? And a United offense that scored less than 17 points per game. That was really what made Kennesaw State struggle in its first year in the FBS last year. They just could not put points on the board on a consistent basis. And yes, they are in the actually top 10 to top 15 in terms of returning production, according to Bill Connolly. But when you're a team that's gone 3-9, 4-8, is that really something that you want to look for? You know, most of those guys back, but they weren't necessarily good. So for Jerry Mack, he's going to have a challenge here in terms of finding a way to maximize the talent on this roster. I think for him, you know, with this being his first FBS head coaching experience, I think this could be one of those learning experiences for the program as you see a new offensive and defensive scheme installed at Kennesaw State. So that is a big reason why they have the lowest floor in the entire Conference USA, where I don't think going to a bowl game is necessarily a possibility. Although if you can get into that 5 wins, I think that would be a really good year for Kennesaw State in its second year in the Conference USA. But I do have them going 3-9 in its second year in the FBS level. There is a few toss-up games I think could be very interesting if you're watching this Kennesaw State team. You know, the home games against Mid-Tennessee, UTEP, and Missouri State, who Missouri State, we'll talk about them in a little bit in particular. They're making their debut, and I think there's a path for Kennesaw to get up to 4 wins, but at the same time, like many of these schools in this conference, there is a disaster class scenario where they could just finish 1-11. It could be a really rough year for Kennesaw State, but, you know, I have them going 3-9 and, you know, still trying to make that adjustment up to the FBS level. Although I am, you know, I'm hopeful for their future because they're in a talent-rich area, which does certainly help. But for 2025, I honestly don't expect much. Speaking of programs where I'm not expecting too much out of is my 11th ranked team in the Conference USA, and that is the New Mexico State Aggies, who, as you may notice, I don't have them too much more highly ranked than Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State did come in as my 133rd best team in the FBS, while New Mexico State is just 2 spots higher. But I do like how their schedule shapes out, so that's why I do give this team the possibility of going to a bowl game with them, probably finishing 5-7, because they do have a home game against Tulsa. They do also play against New Mexico, in non-conference play as well. New Mexico also trying to rebuild with a brand new head coach. And then you have Sam Houston, Missouri State, and Mid-Tennessee State as home games as well, which makes me a little bit more hopeful for New Mexico State, primarily because I think the strength of schedule is going to be relatively favorable for the Aggies. But as for the team itself, this is going to be Tony Sanchez's first year coaching the Aggies. He is going to be in the process of overhauling this roster, a roster that, again, I think is in the bottom 5 in the entire FBS. But he'll have some, but he will have some pieces to work with here, because he did return half of his starters. Then he'll also have an intriguing backfield duo of Seth McGlowan, as well as the transfer out of Montana, Logan Fafia, who, if that name sounds familiar, he is related to Noah Fafia, who is your starting quarterback at Arizona. So that's why that name sounds familiar. So, you know, there's some intriguing pieces here. I think a little bit more intriguing than at Kennesaw State. The schedule does line up a little bit more favorably for the Aggies, particularly once you get into conference play. But beyond that, I think this is a team that could teeter on bowl eligibility, but they will need to win all 4 of those games I talked about: Tulsa, Sam Houston, Missouri State, and Mid-Tennessee State. They got to win all 4 of those games if the Aggies want to go bowling in 2025. Up next with my 10th best team in the Conference USA, I got Middle Tennessee State, the Blue Raiders out of Mooresboro, Tennessee. This is now year number 2 of the Derek Mason era, era where, you know, you see Derek Mason coming with that experience at Vanderbilt. When do we see that translate with that power conference experience? I do think that this should be an improved team from last season, as Nicholas Vatillo does come back and is going to be seen as one of the better quarterbacks in this conference going into 2025. But how much improvement do we see from a defense that allowed over 34 points per game last season? This was a team that really struggled getting those key stops, and based on how I have Mid-Tennessee State as my 130th ranked team, I think this is another year where I think the defense will continue to struggle in 2025, as I do have them going 3-9. But again, another program that could make it to a bowl game if everything goes right. They will need to win really a lot of toss-up games. There is a massive swing. You could take a look at the Middle Tennessee State schedule, and literally half of their games would be considered toss-ups, whether it is them going on the road to play against Kennesaw State and New Mexico State. But then they do also have some more games at home: Missouri State, Jacksonville State, FIU, and Sam Houston. I would consider all of those toss-up games as well. So there's really a very high variability in terms of how things go. This could, as I mentioned with Kennesaw State and Leslie, New Mexico State earlier, complete disaster class of the year. Or if everything bounces right, they could be a 7-5 team, you know, be in the mix to, you know, maybe be in that Conference USA championship game at the end of the year at 7-5. That certainly is in the cards as well. Again, we think we have a good idea of who we think is going to be there when the postseason gets started, but, you know, Middle Tennessee can certainly play spoiler. They do have that kind of potential as a football team with all the cards breaking their way. Which now leads us to our number 9 team in the Conference USA, and it is one of the 2 newcomers in the entirety of the FBS in Missouri State. And this program is certainly capable of surprising some folks in the national media, including myself in its first year at the FBS level, you know, thanks to some key pieces, namely Jacob Clark, who does bring some experience at the quarterback position. Certainly not a bad thing to have when you are making a transition like Missouri State is trying to do in its FBS debut. But what is really going to determine how this season is going to go is how does the defense handle things this season. down the FCS level last year, this was a team in about half of its games, they gave up 30 points or more in half of their games. And now you're going up against overall better competition than what you experienced over the course of last year. So how much of that growth do you see on the defensive side of the ball? And while I think that defensive growth happens, I think this defense will be better than last year when they were down at the FCS level. At the same time, because they are playing better competition, I don't think it necessarily shows in the stats, even though maybe talent-wise it's elevated compared to last year's team. So another squad that I have going 3-9, but again, if the defense does show surprises and Jacob Clark is able to get it clicking early, this is a team that is more than capable of also going to a bowl game. But they're going to need to win most of these following games, and they'll have a lot of toss-ups that they're going to have to handle in Conference USA action, whether it is they're playing on the road against Mid-Tennessee State, New Mexico State, or Kennesaw State. But then you have some home games lumped in there as well that are certainly winnable. If you look at Florida International, UTEP, and Louisiana Tech, all those games are going to be at home as well. I think those are in the toss-up territory. Most of those games I do expect to be losses, but again, all if it goes their way. Once again, it's going to be one of those years where you could be a 7-5 team and really be in the hunt to play in the Conference USA Championship game, just by winning those 6 particular Conference USA games that I just mentioned above. But it's going to take everything going their way, Jacob Clark rolling early, as well as that defense surprising some people and frankly being better than expected. But another program, speaking of FIU, that we just had as a toss-up, that was the next team that I actually do have in my CUSA rankings. They come in at number 8 for me. And it's another team that is going to go through a head coaching transition as Willie Simmons does become the brand new head coach of Florida International and has shown really getting this opportunity after building winning programs at multiple different places at the FCS ranks as well. He'll essentially have a clean slate to work with due to having just 3 starters returning. But one of those key starters that is going to be coming back from last year that could provide some excitement and is a reason to watch games at Pitbull Stadium is Keon Jenkins, who is back with this team and can certainly be a fun player to watch throughout the course of the year. And it's the first team that we have on our list that we do actually have winning, not only winning more than a few games, but also a type of team that does have an American Conference team actually as a toss-up, and that is their rivalry game against Florida Atlantic, trying to show that they are one of the better teams in the southern part of Florida with that particular rivalry game. I do have them as a 4-8 outfit for this upcoming year, but again, as I mentioned with so many other teams, and it's really a theme with this conference, most of the teams are capable of going to the conference, or not conference championship, but qualifying for bowl season. But maybe most of these teams are not expected to compete in bowl season at the same time. But if they win, they do have toss-up games, not just for Florida Atlantic, but even diving into the conference play itself with Delaware, Jacksonville State, and some road matches against Missouri State and Middle Tennessee State as well. If they can win, I think it's 4 out of those 5 games right there, this will be a bowl-eligible team. But they're going to have to go 4-1 in this particular stretch. I think they'll be a few games shy of that, but certainly an intriguing team to watch with Keon Jenkins at the helm, so long as he does remain healthy for this FIU Panthers squad. Now, moving on to number 7, and that is going to be the UTEP Miners with year number 2 of Scotty Walden coming on the way. And this program did show some signs of life, and there's certainly some more energy around this program, not because of the ascension that Scotty Walden has them going right now, but at the same token, UTEP getting that invitation to the Mountain West, so this will be the last year that we will see UTEP in Conference USA. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position. I think that is an intriguing battle to watch. I think it's going to be Skylar Locklear able to hold off Malachi Nelson. Malachi Nelson starting to show maybe he wasn't worthy of that 5-star designation that he had coming out of high school. But let's say that it is Skylar Locklear, or maybe less likely it is Malachi Nelson. If either of those guys can develop and the offensive line can successfully reload and show some chemistry early, this could be a really fascinating offense to watch from that standpoint, because they are going to have one of the best receiving duos in the entire conference, with both Kenny Odom and Cam Thomas coming back with the team. So whoever wins that starting quarterback position, again, at this time, I do think it's going to be Skylar Locklear that's going to be more likely to win that starting job and hold off Malachi Nelson. This is another team that's capable of going to a bowl game, and I had them actually improving from last year, being a 5-7 outfit, and really showing some signs of progress from just 2 years ago, where UTEP really was a bottom feeder. They're slowly working themselves out of the basement. And taking a look at UTEP and what their schedule entails, again, another team that I think could make it to a bowl game as well. They are going to have to win at least, it looks like, 4 out of the 5 toss-up games that I do have for UTEP, whether it is hosting Louisiana Monroe or Louisiana Tech at home, or having Jacksonville State at home as well. That certainly helps. Then you go on the road against Kennesaw State and Missouri State as well. Those are, winning on the road is not the easiest thing to do. So if UTEP can win 4 of those 5 games that I just mentioned, they'll be able to participate in bowl season as well. But losing all of those games I just mentioned, it could end up being a disaster. They actually go backwards and go 2-10 instead. But I think UTEP is certainly improving, and they're going to position themselves well when they're in the Mountain West next year. Moving on, though, to the upper echelon of the Conference USA now. We're jumping into our top 6. Number 6 is going to be where I have the Sam Houston Bearcats. So Sam Houston is not going to have as much upside as maybe a couple of the other teams that I mentioned earlier, because if you take a look at their starting defense right now, the entire starting defense is gone. I mean, literally not one starter from last year's defense is with this team's. Either they graduated or they went in the transfer portal. It is a brand new defense. They do also had their head coach in Casey Cure. He left to go and take the Temple job as well. So there's no defense, or not. I'm not saying there's no defense, but the defense is full of fresh faces, and you have a fresh new face as well in Phil Longo, who does come with a fresh offensive line mind, and with his offensive pedigree, I think the offense should at least be better. So if you're a Sam Houston fan, I think that's something you can definitely look forward to seeing this fall. But because of all of those questions that I mentioned about their defense literally being filled with new faces and not a singular familiar face from last year, this is probably going to be the type of year where you got 12 games on the regular season schedule, and 12 of those games are probably going to be shootouts. I'm not gonna lie to you. I do think that this is a bowl team. I think they're going to take a step back from last year, even though last year was truly an amazing season for this Bearcat squad. And while I still think they're going to go to a bowl game, I think they're going to take a step back from last year, but still a solid team, especially, having the blessing of being in the Conference USA. For them to make bowl season happen for 2 years in a row, though, they do have some toss-ups. And to be honest, I think they're going to have to win all of their toss-up games in order to make bowl season happen, because that 6-6 record that I just talked about is also what I have as the best case scenario for the Bearcats. Going on the road against New Mexico State as well as Middle Tennessee State. Got to win those games. Plus, you have Jacksonville State and Delaware at home. Those are going to be intriguing challenges as well for the Sam Houston Bearcat squad. So it could easily turn into a disaster if the offense doesn't click as expected. But if Phil Longo is the offensive mind that I expect him to be, I should expect to see the Bearcats in a bowl game. Now, moving into my top five, and I think this might surprise some people a little bit because they're also the new kids on the block per se. But before you say anything in the comment section, just hear me out for a quick moment, right? I have Delaware as a top five team in this conference. Yes, I have Delaware at number five out of 12 teams in its inaugural year at the FBS level. Listen, they are going to be having a relatively experienced team on both sides of the ball. Studs like Janathan Silver, KTC, Dylan Trainer, and Gavin Mole. When you have those cats on both sides of the ball who really did their thing at the FCS level, and as I mentioned, it's a relatively experienced team as well. This is a program that right away I think is ready to at least provide some fits. So this is one of the highest rankings. I think this is the third total year that I've utilized this power rating model to have a brand new FBS program inside the top 115, being better than more than 20 FBS programs right out of the gate. That's really a testament to what Ryan Carty's squad is building. It's certainly well equipped for the transition up. Now, does that mean that they're going to be a shoe-in for a bowl game, even if there isn't enough teams that somehow don't reach that 6-6 threshold? Not necessarily. I do think that the Conference USA schedule for Delaware is going to be a little bit tougher than maybe the majority of the teams in this conference, but there is a pathway for the Delaware Blue Hens to theoretically be bowl eligible in its debut season. I do think it involves both beating FIU and Sam Houston on the road, as well as beating Louisiana Tech at home, who we haven't actually mentioned yet. So there's a pathway for Delaware to come out here and be a bowl eligible team in its initial debut season. But at the same time, I think more realistically for me, I see this Delaware team dropping a couple of those games as they try to learn how to find ways as a program to win at the FBS level. So that's where I have them at 4-8, but a little bit higher of a floor for this Delaware team than most of the conference, frankly, is certainly up there for sure. Moving on now to number 4 in the Conference USA, we now get it rolling with Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, they are going to have a brand new head coach, man. Rich Rodriguez, he went to go take that West Virginia job. So now enters Charles Kelly, and Charles Kelly, just like his peer at FIU, is going to be working with a very new slate. He's going to have just 6 returning starters from last year, so the team is going to look completely different, not only from a personnel standpoint, but also from a schematic standpoint as well, as Charles Kelly does have a different offensive philosophy than what Rich Rodriguez likes to run. He does bring in Gavin Wimsatt from Kentucky to potentially be the starting quarterback. He didn't play much for Kentucky last year, but he does bring some intriguing potential. They're also going to be in a spot where they're going to need a significant number of new faces to contribute right away in order to achieve bowl eligibility once again, which is why I have Jacksonville State finishing as a 4-8 team, even though they are a top 4 team in the conference, just because of what we talked about from that 3rd through 12, there's not really that much separation. So even as you get higher up in the conference, you have more of these toss-up games where, you're really more at the mercy of where your home games are and where your road games are, which is why when you really compare 12 through 3, the record prediction is very similar in really that part of the conference, for most of the conference, right? So that's how I view things. Again, they are very capable of going to a bowl game. I think winning 3 out of 4 of these is going to lead to Jacksonville State going to a bowl, and that is all the road games that they have in course of their entire CUSA slate. So all 4 road games that they have is Sam Houston, Middle Tennessee State, UTEP, and Florida Atlantic. They're going to have to be road warriors once they're in Conference USA, in my opinion, in order to make a bowl appearance happen. They got to win 3 out of 4 of those games. And if they don't, then we're going to see Jacksonville State seeing their season end a little bit earlier than what happened to Jacksonville State last year. So that's why I have them at 4-8, because I think they're going to be at least slim underdogs in most of those games that I just mentioned. But I also don't rule out the possibility of them enjoying bowl season. That's the same for most of these teams. Most of these teams in this conference are capable of going to a bowl game. Jacksonville State's going to have its work cut out for it, because I think realistically, I think they're only a favorite in one of those games, in my opinion. Now we get ourselves going into the top 3, where we come across another squad that I think has a very good chance of going to a bowl game and possibly be a dark horse contender to win the Conference USA. It's Louisiana Tech. Now, Louisiana Tech was a team that finished 5-7, and they had the rare opportunity to go into a bowl game because of what happened with the Marshall situation. So even though they got rocked by Army in the bowl game, at the same time though, for Louisiana Tech, those extra practices can really start to show results, specifically here in 2025, because Sonny Crumble needs to start showing results in what's going to be a really pivotal year for Louisiana Tech football, because this is also going to be the last year that Louisiana Tech is going to be a part of the Conference USA. They are leaving for the Sun Belt. Don't know if that's going to happen in 26 or 27. That hasn't been determined as of the recording of this video, but they are going to be leaving for the Sun Belt in at least the next couple of years, and because that's a better conference, frankly, what they're doing right now in Conference USA is not going to fly over in the Sun Belt. I'm just going to let you know right now. But in terms of the 2025 team, if Evan Bullock can continue to develop and the defense can also show some signs of improvement, like I mentioned, this can in fact be a dark horse team to win the Conference USA, or at least challenge for a conference title. And as you know, once you get into those conference championship games, it's a one-game battle. Anything could happen in that point. I have them going as a 7-5 team and really starting showing those results as Sonny Crumby will get his team over the top and get him to a bowl season, and that'll allow him to at least keep his job moving forward. I think there's even more potential for him to be even better than 7-5 and maybe get to that 9-3 range and be in that Conference USA championship, as they do get the opportunity to have Western Kentucky at home. I think they're one of just a few teams in this conference that is actually capable of beating Western Kentucky. You do also have some road games against UTEP, Delaware, and Missouri State that you're going to have to handle, and those could be trickier games for Sonny Crumby's squad. But as long as you win at least one of those 4 games that I mentioned, you'll be in a bowl game. But the expectation, I think, is going to be a little bit higher. I think they can be a 7-win team and, possibly make things really interesting in terms of who challenges for that Conference USA title. I think Louisiana Tech can really make things fun. And speaking of some fun teams that we'll have an opportunity to watch in the conference, Western Kentucky is certainly another one of them. They're my second best team, in my opinion, in the CUSA. They're bringing in both the offensive play caller in Ricky Bowie, as well as Maverick McAvoy from Abilene Christian down at the FCS level. And the way that he was slinging that thing last season for Abilene Christian, and being able to continue to be reunited with his offensive play caller, Western Kentucky absolutely can be one of the toughest offenses in the entire G5 to stop. So they're going to be a very exciting team, a team that I'm extremely high on this fall. I think Western Kentucky can be a 10-win team. Now, Louisiana Tech could provide them some fits going on the road, and it's a little bit later in the year as well. So depending on what growth we see from Louisiana Tech, that could be a potentially toss-up game for the Hilltoppers. But that Louisiana Tech game, I think, could decide at the end of the year who is going to go and play for the CUSA title game. Is it going to be Western Kentucky or Louisiana Tech? I think it has that kind of potential, and be a team that can also play for the title game when it's all said and done. But the number one team that I have in this conference, and it is not going to, I think, surprise a lot of folks. They're like a very popular consensus pick to win this conference, it's Liberty. I do have Liberty as my #1 team because there's no denying it. This team fell short of expectations last year, but even with the roster turnover that took place this offseason, I really like some of the pieces that they were able to bring in through the transfer portal in order to try to retool for his upcoming season. I like what Jamie Chadwell is doing out there in Lynchburg, Virginia, as he's trying to lead this team back to the top of the Conference USA. And this team may also create some very uncomfortable conversations when it comes to, you're talking about the overarching who should be the G5 representative in the college football playoff. Because as you can see with my record prediction, I have them winning every single game. I think there's one toss-up out there, and that is the James Madison game that does fall at home. Yes, I think James Madison is a better team than Liberty, but because Liberty does have James Madison at home, I think that will make Liberty a slight favorite, but certainly a toss-up. But let's say they do go undefeated, though. I think it does create some uncomfortable conversations because there's going to be some valid points made on both sides of whether Liberty should be the G5 representative or not. And let me say it like this, right? I think we all understand that Liberty has the worst strength of schedule in college football. I have them as my 136th strength of schedule. It's the worst in the country for the FBS ranks. But at the same time, though, if they go undefeated, and it is incredibly hard to go undefeated, you have to find room, especially in a 12-team format, to give Liberty that opportunity to compete in the college football playoff at that point, because it's the same principle for Florida State. You know, Florida State, they went undefeated. I thought they should have gotten in over Alabama because Florida State, they went undefeated. They are conference champions. They actually, yes, they did a little bit better of a job with their out-of-conference scheduling, you know, beating an SEC team early on in the year. Actually, multiple SEC teams during its non-conference slate. So, because I believe that Florida State should have gone in as an undefeated team, I'm going to say the same thing for Liberty. I'm going to be on the side of, if 12-0 does happen, they gotta be the G5 representative if nobody else goes to undefeated. Now, if there's multiple G5s that end up going undefeated, like a Boise State or a Tulane or a Memphis, James Madison, you could throw into this conversation as well. You guys should get in over Liberty at that point, because all those teams I mentioned are going to have better resumes than Liberty. But if Liberty is the only undefeated G5, yes, I understand. Usually I'm on the side of, you aren't what your record says you are. I don't believe in that mantra most of the time, but when you go undefeated, no matter what conference you're in, that's incredibly difficult to do. I would say Liberty should get in. But again, if the worst case scenario does happen, in my opinion, and even my worst case, I'm extremely high on Liberty this year. I think the over at 8.5, I believe, is what I saw, would, still at least give them some consideration. But if they drop a single game, I don't think the same way, because again, that strength of schedule is going to hold them back, and I think they are going to have a even smaller margin of error, and I would dare to say no margin of error compared to even most G5 programs. So it will be interesting to see what happens should the 12-0 Liberty season happens. But that is the breakdown of Conference USA, ranking every team in the conference 1 through 12, as we take a look at what the CUSA has to offer from that 50,000 feet perspective. But that is about going to wrap things up here, man. If you enjoyed this breakdown to Conference USA, go ahead and do a couple of things for me. Hit that like button for me, because again, it not only does it warm my cold dead heart, but it lets me know that you enjoy the content. There is a lot of work that goes behind this, so hitting that like button, I would truly appreciate that from the very bottom of my heart. And it gets this video out to more college football fans that are passionate like yourself And you have a real opportunity as well to be an A1 since day one as well by hitting that subscribe button. I only have about a dozen subscribers as of the recording of this video. So hitting that subscribe button allows you to be that A1 since day one. And we're going to have some very exciting things planned in the fall as well that I think you guys are definitely going to enjoy. But I'm your host, Jake of College Football Red Zone. I'll see you guys next time. Let me know down in the comments, by the way, what conference you'd like to see me break down next. But with that, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. See you guys next time, and hope everyone out there has a good one.